Good morning, fourth grade. Today we're going to continue reading in our novel about the American Revolution. Before we get started, we have a quick write. It says, describe a time when your team worked together really well and you accomplished your goal. How did you feel? Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the focus question. It says, how did the Battle of Yorktown impact the outcome of the American Revolution? Our vocabulary words for today are fleet, and that is a group of ships. So you draw a line to this picture. Number 2 is blockade, and that's when ships line up to keep other ships from going into the harbor to get supplies or what they need. So this is an example of a blockade because the ships are blocking the water. And the last one is reinforcements. That's extra personnel or people that the army needs to win the war. So you would draw a line to this picture. Go ahead and turn the page. And before we get started reading, we want to ask a how or why question about the title. Our title is Yorktown. And so in 1A, we would write, why was the Battle of Yorktown important? Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready to read. As we're reading, we want to look for the answer to our how or why question. It says, by August 1781, Cornwallis and his 7,500 veterans were at Yorktown, Virginia, waiting for reinforcements and supplies from British-held New York. Washington and French General de Rochambeau moved to trap Cornwallis, and the French fleet arrived to blockade Yorktown. The Franco-American armies numbered more than 17,000 troops. The British fleet arrived in September, but the French Admiral de Grasse drove it back to New York. Washington fired devastating artillery barrages day after day until Cornwallis gave up. On October 19th, the defeated Royal Army marched out of Yorktown. It was the last major battle of the Revolution. Alright, so if we're going back in our text to find the main idea and thinking about why it was important, this last sentence tells us that it was the last major battle of the Revolution. And if the Americans won, that lets us know that there's a really good chance that the Americans are going to win the American Revolution. So in box 1B, we would write, the Battle of Yorktown was important because it was the last major battle of the Revolution, and the Continental Army won. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for box 2. It says, why were Cornwallis and his men in Yorktown, Virginia? If I go back in my text, it says, by August 1781, Cornwallis and his 7,500 veterans were in Yorktown, Virginia, waiting for reinforcements and supplies from British-held New York. This tells me that they were in Virginia because they were waiting for reinforcements and supplies from the British soldiers in New York. So in box 2A, we would write, Cornwallis and his men were in Yorktown, Virginia, because they were waiting for reinforcements and supplies from British-held New York. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for 2B. It says, vulnerable means susceptible to physical or emotional attack or harm. Use evidence from the text to support the conclusion that Cornwallis and his men were vulnerable. And so if Cornwallis and his men were waiting on reinforcements and supplies, that means that they didn't have enough. They didn't have enough men to fight in battle, and they didn't have enough food or ammunition to win a battle. That means that they were susceptible to attack. If someone attacked them, they would probably lose because they didn't have enough men or supplies. So in box 2B, we would write, Cornwallis and his men were vulnerable because they didn't have enough men or supplies for battle. That's why they were waiting for more. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for box 3. It says, what strategies did the Franco-American Army use during the Battle of Yorktown? If I go back in my text, it says that the French fleet arrived to blockade Yorktown, and the Franco-American armies outnumbered the Cornwallis's army, and they actually had a successful blockade. So they were able to trap Cornwallis inside Yorktown because of the blockade. No one could get in or out. So Cornwallis's men were trapped. In box 3A, we would write, the Franco-American Army trapped Cornwallis and blocked the British fleet with a blockade. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for 3B. It says, were these strategies effective or ineffective? How do you know? So we need to figure out what happened with the blockade. If we keep reading, it says the British fleet arrived in September, but the French Admiral de Grasse drove it back to New York. That means the British could not get through the blockade to Cornwallis and Yorktown. They had to turn around and go back to New York. So this means that the blockade was effective because the British did not get the supplies to Cornwallis. In box 3B, we would write, the blockade was effective because the text says, but the French Admiral de Grasse drove it back to New York. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for 4A. It says, what role did the French play in the Battle of Yorktown? And so we know that the French were able to effectively block the British troops from getting reinforcements and supplies to Cornwallis. And if they hadn't done that, the Americans might not have won the battle. And so in box 4A, we would write, the French helped the American army win the battle because they used a blockade to keep Cornwallis from receiving reinforcements and supplies. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for 4B. It says, if the French soldiers had not been present at the Battle of Yorktown, how might their absence affect the outcome of the battle? So we know that the French helped the Americans win. So if they hadn't been there, Cornwallis would have gotten his supplies and he could have won the battle. So in box 4B, we would write, if the French had not been present at the Battle of Yorktown, Cornwallis might have received his supplies and reinforcements. This would have given him a better chance of winning. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the paragraph. It says, why was the Battle of Yorktown important? You can use your main idea from box 1 and quotes from box 3 or box 4 for your answer.